Welcome to the Hope Over Coffee podcast, the place where we believe that life is better when we know and are known by others. We're here to stir your soul, ignite your passions, and help you find the hope that you've been searching for. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and enjoy the conversation as we dive into the topics that matter most. We are excited to share this journey with you, and we hope that you will join us every step of the way. All right, welcome back to the Hope Over Coffee podcast. I am your host, Jared OJ, and this week I got what I call a special guest. He's special to me anyway. I don't know that he actually knows this, or I hope he knows this, that I actually look to him quite a bit as a spiritual mentor in my life. He's sat with me on a couple of different places in my life, and I think he's spoken to me quite a bit. And to be honest, I think that you have, unknown to you through your guidance of walking with me spiritually, that this is help get to where the podcast is, to be honestly. He's special to me. I'm sure he's special to a lot of people around here. And I'd just like to introduce to some of y'all, and that everybody else just see, that it is Mr. Jack Tillery on the podcast this week. So how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. You know how the day started.
It's a little rough morning. So I just wanted, I know a lot of people know your story, and a lot of people know your health issues and all those things, but I wanted to know if you would go a little further back and tell me, if it's okay with you, again, just share as much as you want to or don't. What was Jack like pre-Jesus in his life? Is that somewhere we can go?
Sure.
Okay.
That's whenever I think about pre-Jesus, I think about I started a journey that was based on what I had been taught. Mm-hmm. This is what a Baptist does. You walk the aisle at 9 years old, you get saved. For me, at 13, I feel like and totally believe that God called me into ministry. Mm-hmm. I didn't understand that fully. And it was, through those early days, I just did everything. I was church on Sunday, Wednesday, all those things. Along the way, I was introduced to some things in my life that were not good. Mm-hmm. And it was once you get hooked or just have that tendency to want to go there. Mm-hmm. And I'm talking about pornography. Mm-hmm. The one thing that it's just hard not to go there,
right?
And that was early on. That's when there was nothing but magazines, and you had to find them, and you had to buy them or whatever you wanted to do.
Yeah, it's not like it is today, where it's literally on everybody's phone.
No,
walking around in their pocket.
No, but I still. I went to college. I went to a small Baptist college in North Carolina. I got a great experience there. Great experience. Have great friends from there that still contact me today. Mm-hmm. Went to. I worked 2 years at a ski slope. While I had time to do what I wanted to do, and mm-hmm. I told my mom and my dad, I said, I want to make money, and I want to have a good time doing it. And so I worked the golf course one summer and the ski slope two winters in a row, and just had a ball. Clean fun, not bad fun.
Right.
Still, that part of me was still, it would, if there was an opportunity, I'd jump on it. Mm-hmm. but ended up leaving for Southern Seminary in 1979 and finished with a master's in religious education with an emphasis in social work, and thought that I would one day end up at a summer camp. I had a dream of having a summer camp, like a sailing summer camp for underprivileged kids.
That would sound so interesting.
Oh, I mean, it's still a dream because my first churches were down in Florida, and so we were on the coast. We had a connection where we actually took them down to a place that down the Keys, and we went scuba diving, we went snorkeling, we went we went diving, just all the fun things, and they had sailboats, and we would go out and we'd help them learn how to sail on these small sunfish sailboats in the Keys. And so, I mean, it was just like whenever I started my first job, because I didn't know what I didn't think I was good enough to preach. I didn't think I had the abilities to do some of the things that I think of pastors doing.
Mm-hmm.
But I found out that the right shoe for me was doing youth ministry. And I love kids.
Yeah.
And to see them being changed, even though I didn't fully understand it, it was still cool.
Mm-hmm.
But I went through all that period from 1980 to 1993, I guess. No, 95, because it was 15 years doing youth ministry, had a ball, but I was driven by a goods outweighing my bad.
Mm.
I lived by that.
Right.
If I could make my good outweigh my bad, I got it fixed.
Mm-hmm.
But I realized that was not what God wanted me to do. Finally was called to church here in Moss Bluff, and got the privilege of serving here from 1995 till 2009, 14 years here under sometimes difficult times,
Mm-hmm.
but yet every pastor that served there was a reason that I was under them.
Really?
And I learned a lot from every man. That's hard for some people to maybe understand, but whenever I was searching, I was searching hard. In April 30th, 1995, I had a conversation with James Rivers.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked to him. I said, James, let me ask you a question. I said, the more I grow, the more I realize I am a wretched man. And I always thought that in order to be called to ministry, you've got to be saved. But yet I was living a life that if the good outweighs my bad, then it's okay. And that's what I had to maintain. But James questioned me on my thoughts and my beliefs. And it was then that the truth of who I was not what I wanted it to be. Mm-hmm. And I finally came to a place that I realized my brokenness. God let me see myself and see that my worst case enemy is myself. And that was a life-changing moment, and I and a revival. I mean, it was amazing. What was so amazing is the guy told us that was there preaching, he said, I'm going to do nothing but salvation messages during this revival. So if you want to have a revival, people got to get saved. And so I never forget saying, I don't want to go in there. I don't want to doubt my salvation. I don't want to have questions about it. And so whenever this took place, I never forget, I was standing on the road. Mercy Dixon was behind me. She was the ladies' minister, not minister, but I wouldn't. The ladies' ministry leadership person.
Right.
And there was a friend that we had that we've been praying for, and as soon as we stood up for the invitation, and he said, as soon as you stand up, your knees lock, he said, you start walking towards the pew. I mean, it was very intense, and I was not under big conviction, but I was, because it was a passage out of Matthew 7 about, Lord, didn't we know you? Didn't we, call your name? Did we not cast out demons? And the last part he says, I never knew you.
Right.
And that was pretty penetrating, and I was very familiar with that passage.
Mm-hmm.
But God, when I stood up, she grabbed me from behind as soon as I stood up, had me the back of the arm, and she said, Jack, Jason wants to give his life to the Lord. Would you walk with him down there? And so it's like God knew that I would not walk down there.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like faith. You can't. Faith is a gift. And unless you have faith, you can't be saved.
Right.
And it's like God knew what my problem was. I had no faith in him.
Mm-hmm.
And he had to get me down there. And it was, I sit there, sometimes I laugh about it. But I mean, it's like Jason, I walked with Jason down there, but God had me by the other arm, ushering me down there.
Right.
And I never will forget praying, God, I don't care what anybody else thinks in this church. I want to know that if I die tonight, I belong to you.
Mm.
And within 3 months of being on staff at Moss Bluff, I finally committed fully. And surrendered totally to the Lordship of Jesus in my life. And
that
it was so real
mm-hmm.
that afterwards I counseled Jason.
Mm-hmm.
I counseled another friend that was Jason. He got saved, and I got up and I walked away, and Tenny and my best friend that was on staff, they walked around the corner, and Tenny just looked at me, my wife, and she said, you got it settled, didn't you? And she could see it and know
Right.
it. And so it wasn't there was battles before, but they were not near what they would be afterwards.
Right.
And that's when I began to understand more about spiritual warfare.
Mm.
I knew that when I was struggled the worst was some of the best years that I had at Moss Bluff.
Really?
And but I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't know how to tell people I need help.
Right. Sitting here listening, like I know I've heard your story more than once.
Mm-hmm.
But I just feel like I'm in a different place, and hearing that again, I think about. So you're from North Carolina. You're right,
Mm-hmm.
North Carolina. At seminary, you rolled into student ministry,
Mm-hmm.
that eventually brought you over here, to where you were on staff, and your salvation wasn't locked in yet. That's
right.
I would hope that that's encouraging for somebody to know that even staff members struggle, and staff members of churches or people too who have real problems that they have to deal with just like the rest of us, that they don't have it all figured out. But also, man, after that moment of really just locking that in, and you're saying that there was, you probably had more joy, as you said, Tini saw it on your face, like she just knew something was different about you in that moment. So even with that, and going through what sounded like there was other trials of just being on staff, you still found a joy that was not there before?
Oh, the peace was what was overwhelming to me. And I also found strength to fight the battle whenever it made itself available to me. I mean, whenever I don't want to say it like that, but whenever I was faced with a battle of struggling with that temptation in my life. I mean, lust was a issue for me,
Right.
and who do you talk to about that? I mean, as a staff member,
Right.
that was during the time that if you were to be publicly known, you're gone.
Yeah, you'd have been run out.
Yeah, and it was very harsh as to what, and I wanted to tell somebody, and it was not until Fight Club that for the first time I was able to share that openly.
So do you think that there are, I mean, we know there are, but how do you think there are other pastors, other clergy, ministers, however you want to put it, that are leading churches, leading other people who are stuck in whatever sin that they're in? More, I feel like men have tendency to lean toward more pornography, and they want to tell somebody, but they're afraid that they can't because they will be run out or they'll lose their job or whatever. Like, how do we help with that? Like, what? I know for us, just going through Fight Club and stuff like that, I'm more open to just listening. And to me, it doesn't matter if you're on staff or whatever. You're a person dealing with a sin issue. We all sin. We all sin differently, and you got struggles just like we all got. But how do we encourage those type of people that are in those positions to find someone they can talk to and let them know what's going on? Because in my mind, if you don't, either you're going to just collapse because you can't keep up the facade of what you're doing, and it's just going to fall apart, or it's going to come out and then you will be run out because you've been hiding it for so long.
I would say until a man is really willing to be honest and transparent about their needs, and to say that song, Lord, I Need You, that's almost a daily song that I sing in my little office before my quiet time. Because I can honestly say that I am free of that temptation.
Right.
I am totally free. And what was it? Sobriety, sober from any temptation of that for the last several years. And it's really nice to sense that God can free me. It may come at a cost. It may come at feeling like you are the worst peon on the earth, and I mean, you go back and you question God, could you have used anything I ever did? And it was, and I just know that I believe that God has given me the assurance that during my years in ministry, He knew my battle.
Mm-hmm.
I think over time, He just gently moved me further and further away. And His Spirit in me enabled me to overcome. It was just the power of Christ and the Spirit of Christ in me that gave me grace to just. This is a place I'm not going to go.
Right.
These walls are established. I've got my, what do you call it, the guardrails
Mm-hmm.
in my life that God has given me a total freedom there. And I don't take any credit for that. I don't take credit for saying, I can do this all by myself or anything like that, because I can't.
Mm-hmm.
I am totally dependent on the Holy Spirit to guide me and to keep me close to His Word. I'll spend every day in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
I will try to seek God's face. I will try to seek His Word and how I can apply that to my life. And the more I do that, the more I'm able to walk away from the times I have that little lure
Mm-hmm.
of temptation. That's one of the things that gives me probably. I mean, I served through some of Moss Bluff's most difficult times, and I love that church.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is that it was a difficult time for me. At the same time, I've seen what God has done in the last few years and put together a staff that really does seem to take seriously that part of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And most every staff member that I know of in the church has been a part of Fight Club in some way, still are actively come in and do stuff like when the kickoff for the challenges and stuff like that.
Right.
They're a part of that, and they have each been in a part of a small group. And that's the coolest thing to me, that it's a conversation that they have had and they have talked through, and realizing that as anyone can be susceptible to that.
Oh yeah. It does. And so here recently, I'm in a small group of men, kind of a D group setting, just kind of diving through the Word, conversations, stuff like that. And recently, I have been digging into what it means to be a son of God, to be in the family of God, and to be considered a son, and what it means. And listening to you talk about in those 3 months, probably before that, but in those 3 months of just really struggling and not having your faith and your belief locked in, like you believed it, but like there was still, I guess, doubts is what I kind of interpreted it as. There's doubts in your head. Because I deal with this personally, of almost like an imposter syndrome. Like, I know I'm a believer, and I know the things about God, and I know that how much He cares for me, how much He loves me, and that He died for me, and on all these things. But at the same time, I have a hard time believing stuff sometimes. So how would you encourage me or anyone else that is kind of in that situation of feeling almost an imposter because I'm a believer, but I can't. Sometimes I have a hard time getting it from here to here, from head to heart. Like, what kind of encouragement would you give to someone like that, knowing what you went through all the way up to that time and through the hard times after that?
The thing that I've learned is, I mean, God has given me privilege to do. I don't understand sometimes, but He has given me the privilege to be a part of some pretty amazing ministries. While, especially here at Moss Bluff, the startup of Faith Walk, being a part of Fight Club, and doing it so long. I mean, now I think it's either 4 or 5 years leading a group with Kenny Williams, and they have. I mean, Kenny's a great encourager, but the camaraderie of other men that are honest enough to say, "Hey, this is real for me, and this is where I struggle." I want to be around men that are willing to be honest.
Right.
Honest about our marriages, honest about our doubts that you talk about. I mean, for so much of my time in ministry, I never felt like I was good enough. I remember I had a friend that was a youth pastor, and he could do everything. He could sing, he could do acting, he could do the most creative youth pastor I've ever met in my life. We met skydiving. He was skydiving, came down to Florida to skydiving. He's a youth pastor in Tennessee. But we would go, and I'd go up in the plane because we knew the people owned it, and I'd sit in the seat, and he'd dive out over me, and there was so much, and I always would walk away from that relationship, and I used to think, I don't have anything to give here. He can do everything.
Right.
And he spent a week with me right before I was getting ready to get married. And at the end of the week, he came up to me and he said, "I want you to know this." He said, and his education he had not done anything with. And he said, "You've inspired me that I need to go back to school, finish my schooling, and go to seminary." And I was like, I did that? I mean, how did I do that? I mean, I don't have it all together, and I didn't tell him all that, but but I've always felt like I didn't measure up.
Right.
I struggle with that, and the enemy used that hard on me to cause me to doubt, to cause me to back away. But over time, I saw that God let me do things that were far beyond what I'd ever dreamed that I'd be a part of.
Right.
When we started the mission ministry at the church, that was a big deal. My heart was broken for God's heart for the nations. We learned what it meant to have a burden for the lostness of the world. And we pursued where we felt led. And as you well know, Nepal was a big place for me, and Suriname was for a big place for a different group of people in our church. New York was a place that was for a unique group of our church. Idaho was a big place for another group of people.
Really? I haven't heard about.
Yeah, we planted churches in those places, and in Utah, Idaho, and New York, and we went to New York several years in a row, and in the Bronx. But we spent a lot of time in Nepal. We spent at least 12 years there, and then multiple trips there. And then we went to into India several times, and it's pretty amazing, different place. But you can see literally the darkness of the world and how lost our world is. And you're trying to figure out, how do I get the gospel of Jesus Christ to a people group that has no clue who Jesus is?
Right.
They just know his name in vain.
So the trips, were they all evangelistic, or did y'all do like build stuff or?
Primarily evangelistic. I did take college students on longer trips, and we would go and stay. In the summertime, we would go and they would work in a school teaching English. And then every afternoon, we'd just go around the village getting to know people. And I mean, this is high Himalaya, no cars, no vehicles. We had to backpack up there or fly a helicopter up there, either one, to get to the village. It was like at 12,500 feet. But it was, you just never knew what was going to happen and when those conversations would open up. And we had some pretty phenomenal experiences where, like the headmaster of the school, we talked with him. We presented the gospel to him, and he just said that he believed in all the gods. But then one day on a Sunday morning, and I'll forget it, it was on a Sunday morning early, on my way to church, we got to church and I looked at my email and there was a letter from him, and he said, "Jack, I have come to believe that the Jesus of the Bible is truly God. And I choose to follow Jesus." And I mean, that it was just the coolest thing.
Yeah.
And we weren't even there. He was over there and we were over here.
Right.
But it was all those seeds that had been planted during the time we were there with him that all of a sudden we get that kind of message. And I sit there and I think to myself, how'd you do that, God? You know,
Yeah.
It's not us, but it's Christ in us that somehow, when shared in the power of the Holy Spirit, who he is, God can take a message of good news that Jesus came to this earth to die on a cross, to forgive us of our sins, to make atonement for our sin, and give us a second chance.
Yeah.
I mean, it just blows me away that, you know, he ever let me be a part of something like that. But I will cherish, and I hope it brought glory to him.
Mm-hmm.
I will cherish those days and those moments, despite the battles.
Right.
And those battles were tough during those times.
Mm-hmm.
Not so much whenever I was over there, but you come back home, back to the West, and you see the billboards that have different things on them, and, you know, all of a sudden it's like you're thrown into a world that's so different.
Mm-hmm.
And I've just learned, Job said, I made a covenant with my eyes not to look lustfully at a woman.
Mm-hmm.
That's my paraphrase. But you know, I've learned, so that's so true. You look at a woman in her face, and you look at the beauty of her countenance, and you celebrate what God's made her. but it's not that lustful tendency
Right.
that once was there, and I shamefully look back on and remember.
So, right now, I appreciate your authenticity and sharing all those things, and it's making me think about here lately. I'm making me a shirt, and it's gonna have on the front. It's WYSIWYG, and it's what you see is what you get. And that has been kind of pressing on me here lately, of the guys in the Fight Club, just men in my community, men that I'm around, men that I can invest in and whatnot. Is I want us to be a men that are what you see is what you get all the time. If we're out in public, I want us to be the same out in public that we are in our quiet room, in our rooms, in our quiet time, and I just think that you are a great example of that. Of if we were standing in the hallway talking at church, you're the same guy there as you're sitting here, or the same guy that's just in another part of the world, in another country. And I say that to say that I hope that inspires other men to let them know that they can be authentic and vulnerable with people, the right people, and finding the right community. 'Cause that's what I was really thinking of, was the Fight Club community. And going back to what you're saying about just the men, finding somebody to talk to, like our staff, they have small groups. There's Fight Club. There's all those things. I wish that more men would understand and grasp the concept of finding authentic, vulnerable community and living that out. And in that example of living that out, that's just the Spirit's gonna be working through them, and to where they can find that freedom and overcome the things that are in their way. I know for me, I struggled with pornography for a long time, and I didn't start finding freedom until Fight Club. And it's just my life has been really different since then, and I would love for more men to find the same freedom that we found. Finding those communities, finding those people that they can talk to, that are safe, and they are able to talk about the deep down secrets that they don't want anyone to know, but they're so they're over it, and they're struggling, and they're tired of struggling with it, and they want someone to talk to. I just hope that other men can find that. That's really kind of my passion, and what has really turned this podcast into is finding men to be vulnerable and authentic, to say that, hey, you can do this, you can find other people, and you just gotta look.
Yeah, it's crazy. The first Fight Club meeting I went to, Ross it was right before the first challenge, and Ross asked me, he said, "I'm going to send you he had the guidelines for what it was going to be. He said, I want you to read this and tell me what you think." So I read all through it. I mean, pages after pages. It took me all day. And he said, "I'm getting ready to go present it to Brian to get started." So I called Ross, and I said, "Ross, man, did you write all this up?" I was just like amazed. It was very intense and well put together. And he said, "Yeah." He said, "We worked on it, and I think they had a model that they went by. But anyway, they put it together. They want the way that they felt like the Fight Club should start here." And he said, at the end of our conversation, which was not very long because he had other plans, he asked me, he said, well, do you want to be a part? You going to take the challenge? I said, Ross, I said, you tell me that we have to do 25 sit-ups and 25 push-ups. And I said, if I get on the floor, I'm not getting back up. And he just laughed. He said, well, you can take your cane and do 50 cane curls. and so it was a big joke. And I said, yeah, I'd be up to it. He said, well, you can come this Wednesday night and just get a taste of what it's like.
Mm-hmm.
You can be in my group and just get a taste. And so I came. I walked in. I sat down after the main group and I listened. And Ross said, we're going to go around and tell our stories. And Jack, when we get to you, if you want to share something, that's fine. If you don't, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But we're going to let each guy share something about themselves. And he said, you might, if you don't know what to really say, you might just think about when was the first time you felt shame and guilt. And I remember the guys that shared. First guy left me just stunned. The next guy began something that tears just kept falling. I was fighting it the whole night, and it finally got around to me.
Mm.
And I said to them, I said, you know, I'll be honest with you. When I think of shame and guilt, I know exactly when I felt shame and guilt for the first time. And as I told that story, everyone in the room just started smiling because they knew exactly what it was growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And when you discover things about yourself that you never discovered before, and then you wonder what's wrong and what causes me to feel this way, and why does this feel so good or whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
we were all just getting tickled. And now as I think about that, it was hard to get that out there the first time, but now it's something that we can all share a chuckle about, about that whole ability to finally open up.
Right.
And I eventually came back to Tenny, and I told her, I said, I need to ask you to forgive me. And I went to each one of my kids, and I said, I need to ask you to forgive me because I left you unprotected as a father.
Mm-hmm.
I was not the spiritual protector that you needed to my kids at a point in their life that they needed it the most. And you talking about humbling, that was humbling. Tenny said to me, she said, she looked at me, she said, after I told her, I said, I need to ask for your forgiveness and tell you where I struggled. And I said, I left our house unprotected. And she said, that's probably that probably took more courage for you to say than you realize. I mean, she was affirming
Mm-hmm.
that same transparency and honesty. She's never questioned me about what's going on Wednesday night. She doesn't question me whenever I'm sometimes hours in my little office writing posts and then sending out encouragement notes,
Mm-hmm.
try to send out encouragement notes to my guys in my Fight Club group. And so I look back on that and think about what was so, at first, what seemed really painful, and maybe it was, because you're admitting just what you are.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point, I was just wretched. I was, that's the only word I know to say.
Right.
And my thought life was not good. My mind was not good as far as my thoughts. But the thing is, Lord Jesus Christ forgave me of that.
Mm-hmm.
Have I paid the price that I maybe needed to? Well, it's not so much that I paid the price. He paid the price. He paid my price.
Right.
And that's very humbling to know that he loved me that much, that he would forgive me
Mm-hmm.
and give me a second chance. And now why it's important for me to try to pour into men that may have the same struggle.
Right.
I can't explain it. It's just amazing what God has done in and through that ministry.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, amazing.
So, how I don't know if how's the right word. With your medical issues that you've gone through in your life, I don't even know I can't remember what year your transplant happened.
That
Your
was
heart.
2009.
2009. So that was right at the end of your career at First Moss Bluff, right? Okay. Just looking at God's amazing goodness in the fact that you did have a heart transplant. If I'm assuming if that wouldn't have happened, you wouldn't be here today, right?
I mean, no.
Yeah. Just to have all your story and to be able to sit with those men and to write all that, like that overwhelming goodness that God has given you to even get to this point is just absolutely amazing and wonderful to watch. What was life like going into the fact that you had to have a transplant? Like what was your thoughts in your faith and what God was doing in your life when that came up?
I don't want to describe it totally this way, but I guess that's when God was putting his thumb on me.
Mm-hmm.
That's really not right. If you can, it was the way that he knew that would change me.
Mm-hmm.
And that period of time was pretty significant. We didn't know if I was going to live.
Right.
We didn't know they had attempted heart kidney transplants 3 times before me at Ochsner's in New Orleans. I was patient number 4. The first 3 did not survive. And I mean, they all died soon afterwards.
Because it was heart and kidney, right?
Right.
I forgot the kidney part. It was both.
Doing the same at the same time. You got a major incision down the chest, and then you got another major incision down around your abdomen. They put the kidney into the abdomen area, around a little pocket below, around the appendix.
Mm-hmm.
And but they hadn't anybody survive it. And so I was number 3. And I am, as I understand, the longest surviving heart kidney transplant recipient in the state of Louisiana. And I'm living on a heart that they say is like a bulldog and it's running good.
Right.
And but my kidney has started to fail. And but 15 years, and they told me, if you get 10 years out of this kidney, you're going to be fortunate.
Right.
Well, I got a doozy of a kidney and a doozy of a heart.
Yeah.
I had a great donor. His name was Mike. And but the kidney is starting to go, and we're just waiting for the. We've got living donors, and we're going to move towards that, and hopefully it will be happen as early as June. That's kind of what I'm getting. But I'm clear. I'm cleared as far as the hospital wanting to transplant me. They wanted. He said you got a good heart, and we'd like to give you make sure you have an opportunity. And so I'm just waiting now. They're assessing and doing testing of the living donors that have stepped up, and but that goodness, especially during the heart kidney, it was like afterwards, and I was enjoying the new break on life that I just knew that there was more than God had for me. My motto, my mantra, I guess you might say, every morning is, God, you're not finished with me yet.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that, and I really believe it. And we just keep moving in places that we can be used. And next thing is being a part of the plant at First North. And,
Okay.
so Tenny and I signed up for that. We've been part of the core leadership team, and we're excited about doing what we're going to do there.
Mm-hmm.
But I still got to get this other kidney going because it's gone. My old one's just about gone.
Right.
Not on dialysis, thank goodness, but just need to get it taken care of. So
within the next 2-3 months is what you're looking at.
that's what I'm thinking.
Awesome.
From everything we've heard thus far. So spent a day testing in January, and the doctors told me, he said, you know, if you go on a regular donor list, he said it'd be probably 8 years before you got a kidney. And I thought, I'll be on dialysis by then. I've got to be on that. I should be on dialysis now. I mean, most people would be.
Mm-hmm.
But when the doctors found out I did have living donors, my kidney doctor said, it's worth the risk. Let's see if we can keep your kidney going until we can get that living donor ready. And then once that living donor is ready, you can get that good kidney put in. And so just trusting the Lord in that, and waiting, I can tell you it's not very pleasant.
Yeah.
But I still trust Him. I mean, that's the only place I can go. I've learned a lot about persevering and trusting Him whenever you don't have any other place to go. It's whenever you know you're in His hands, and He is like my verse for my first transplant was Psalm 27:13. It says, be confident in this, that He who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. That's not it. It says, be confident in this, that He who, I can't believe I just dropped it. This has been a banner verse in my life.
Pressure of the camera.
Yeah, that's all right. I got a new verse for this time. I actually had it marked here, but 27:13 says, "I'm confident that I'll see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living." And I remember after, while I was getting ready for it, I remember thinking, where is the land of the living? Is it here? Or is he talking about heaven? Because I know that the goodness of the Lord is there.
Right.
But I said, and more I thought about it, I said, if it's in the living, the goodness of the Lord is here on earth. The goodness of the Lord is in heaven. We've got it in both places.
Mm-hmm.
And I got pretty excited about it, that I would experience the goodness of the Lord both here on earth and both here in heaven. And I cannot tell you how the last 15 years since transplant, God has shown me over and over and over and over and over again his goodness.
Mm-hmm.
And it just simply humbles me, and it causes me to respond in gratitude to him for what he has done. And I know that's something I can't make come up out of me.
Right.
That's a God thing. And his Spirit's working in me. When he lets me see the goodness, it's like, whoa. Look what God just did.
Mm-hmm.
And then when all these people signed up to be donors, and most of them I don't know,
Humbling.
I don't have an answer.
Mm-hmm.
Except God's good. I remember asking my good friend at Transplant the first time I asked him, I said, I just don't understand why God's so good to me. And James Rivers, that's who it was, and James just looked me square in the eyes. He said, it has nothing to do with you. God is good because that's who he is.
Right.
And I remember thinking, oh, just humble me again. And those two are very important verses. The one that God gave me is, I don't know exactly when. I can't remember if anybody gave it to me, shared the verse, or what. I can't honestly say, but I remember reading this, and it's Psalm 138. And it says, the Lord will fulfill his purpose for me. The Lord will fulfill his purpose for me. Your steadfast love, O Lord, endures forever. Do not forsake the work of your hands. I'll go back to Philippians 1:6, where it says, I'm confident I'll see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the I'm confident that he who began a work will carry on to completion. That he who began a good work will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. Mm-hmm. And that's Philippians 1:6. And I've known that God's always at work. But it's like in this verse, David says, God, you will fulfill your purpose for me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think his purpose for me is finished yet. That's what I believe.
Yeah.
And then it says, your steadfast love, O Lord, endures forever. And then he says, do not forsake the work of your hands.
Mm-hmm.
I can just hear David just not shaking his fist at God or anything like that, but just saying, don't stop doing what you've already started in my life.
Mm-hmm.
That you say that you're going to carry it on to completion. You promised me that,
Right.
and that's the way I believe. In this context, it's like, God, I'm believing because I believe you put it in me. Your Spirit's put it in me that you're not finished.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how that looks, if it's just First North, if it's whatever, I don't care. I just want to be available and useful in some way.
Mm-hmm.
All the days of my life. It doesn't matter anymore. 15 years, I've learned when I went on disability, you aren't compensated like you once were.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't matter. There's nothing that matters as far as physical, financial well-being. We've been taken care of. He's provided everything that we've needed, and we just live in His purpose, and I feel like it more now than I ever have.
So, how, in living in that purpose with your first transplant, how has that played into your ministry of helping other people? Like, I don't know if that's the right wording, but how have you been able to use what God has done through you in your transplant to minister to other people?
Well, number one, verses that I've shared that God has used to get me through bypass surgery, transplant, and I mean, there's James 1:2-4, Isaiah 41:10, Psalm 27:13 and 14. 14 talks about waiting on the Lord. Philippians 1:6. Some of the verses I've mentioned thus far, and then in Psalm 138. But Isaiah 41:10 is a verse I share with everybody. I mean, a lot of people that have needs, but they know where I learned it and how I learned it, how God brought it into my life. And I've just told my story. I learned to tell my story. And I learned to do it. I mean, I don't. It's not just a story of transplant, but it's a story of what God's taught me through the transplant. And I've gotten to share that story many, many times in public settings, in one-on-one settings. I mean, right after transplant, that's how it started.
Right.
It just began, and it snowballed. I've been on TV. I've taught to classes. I've talked to bigger settings of people where, I mean, at our church, I've gotten to share my story at the for the Louisiana Organ Procurement Agency. I was able to share my story with at least 200 people in one setting, and another where there's a lot of people there. And it was, I'd heard, we've talked about having a story, but I was learning to tell the story of where God had brought me through my screwed up mind about my salvation. And then He gave me the opportunity to build on how good God is and how real He is, and His faithfulness. Am I learning to have faith in Him and trust Him through the transplant? That it was just, and when the surgeon said, I said, he told me, he says, you just need to get out and tell your story. And I said, well, I know about telling my story, but I don't know. I'm not sure what you mean. I can't ask for that. And he gave me little pointers. And what I found out when I got back from that January 3rd meeting, this last January, that people would come up and they say, what's going on with your health? Where are you at? And it gives me an opportunity just to share with you. And then I have these big guys that come running by and say, hey, don't you worry about that kidney. You can have one of mine. And I mean, it was just amazing how many people would just say things like that. And whether they actually did, I don't care. It just encouraged me that, hey, there's a man that's willing.
Yeah.
I mean, think that people would be willing to give me something like that. Again, that is humbling. But the story came as I shared with individuals whenever they would come and ask me, "How you doing with your kidney?" And so you realize that God, it's not the story that you're writing, but it's the story that God is writing on your life and your response to it.
Mm.
And it's as it's gone, I've seen every time that I've had a chance to share, it gets easier and easier.
Right.
If somebody asks me, how are you doing? What do you need? And I mean, I don't ask for a kidney. I'll just explain to them, just join me in prayer that God will provide. I only need one.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've got like I said, Oshner's is blown away with the number. I don't know that number. I don't want to know that number.
Yeah.
But it's just cool to know that they've got what they need.
Mm.
So
do you watch The Chosen? Have you watched any of it?
I've watched the first two, I think.
Okay.
I've not seen the third one.
We went and watched season 4 in the theaters. Not the point. Point being, then I think it's in season 3. You probably haven't seen it yet. The feeding of the 5,000.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think I did see that.
You did see that one? Okay. So when he's up front preaching, and then the disciples are further back in the crowd, and they're literally just echoing what he's saying, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that the people in the back of the crowd can hear it. I've been thinking about that scene lately, and I think you're an example of it. I think we're both an example of it. Is, from that point in time, Jesus spoke the words that his disciples has echoed into the crowd, that has echoed to the next set of generation that has echoed. So we're just literally hearing it and then echoing out his goodness and his love. And I think that through you and just how you are what you are, and we see you for who you are, and in vulnerability and honesty, and what God has done in your life, that you've just echoed that, and it's going out into the other people that want to respond in love. So I just thought that's the image that just keeps playing through my mind, is that you're just echoing what you've heard, him speaking to your life, and it's going to other people, and it's going to affect them, and it's going to echo into the next generation. I just think it's really cool. Anything else in your life that you see God doing a work that you would want to share with someone for encouragement?
Probably still doing Fight Club.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, every time it comes to the end of a challenge,
Mm-hmm.
And you start to do that time where you're in between Fight Club challenges, it gets sometimes very disappointing because everybody kind of disappears.
Right.
A lot of times they just want a break. And one thing I've learned is that I can't take a break.
Mm.
I have got to be in His Word in some way every day. And I'm not talking about an app. I know there's a lot of good apps out there that you can use.
Mm.
I'm not talking about watching a podcast. I'm not talking about, and I'm not nothing against your podcast at all. It's just,
I'm no replacement for anything.
I think it all boils down to this book.
Yeah.
And this is my favorite Bible.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have as much markings in here as I would like for it to.
Yeah.
But it's been very, very well used. And the reason is because I usually work more off when I'm writing, I don't write well, and I use the computer. Where I actually listened to a discussion last night and talked about how important it is to write your thoughts out with a pen because it slows you down and two, it makes you think. You go from that sitting up and writing to sit back in the chair and just stopping and thinking. Now, what's he really saying there? You know, what's the point of his? We've been reading the book of Daniel.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's been some things. I mean, I've read Daniel. I know the major stories in there. But it's been a long time since I've sat down and read it and studied it. And I have loved every moment of it.
Mm-hmm.
And just looking at the unbending or the total commitment that those men had despite the circumstances, and then living respectfully under the authority that God put them in, and how God used that to cause the kings to respect them,
Right.
in the long run. And I'm not saying that you look just to be. I mean, they weren't. I mean, they did not worship the same God.
Right.
And I thought, how important is it for me to be out there and to share my faith without any hindrance, because my generation is slowly, it's beginning to die out. I was born in a time that there's a significant generation I had the opportunity to make a difference in. And some younger people as well, because that was where my ministry was. But I'm catching up. I got more to do, and I still think there's a lot of lost people that are ready to find the real answer that's going to enable them to finish the years of their life and to pass it on.
Right.
And I guess that's probably one of my greatest passions right now. Individuals, I'm always looking for that opportunity to have a conversation. As Brother Roy tells us, be curious.
Be curious, Roy, and this curious. I affectionately blame Roy for some of my stuff, but it's a good thing.
I love him and I appreciate his honesty. And but whenever he taught that counseling class, I think you may have been in there too, on where he taught on curiosity. It just blew me away.
No, I didn't do that part. I had sessions with him, and just being around in Fight Club and whatnot. I think he gave me all the notes from that class.
Yeah,
to read through, but definitely. And I told this. You said you hadn't watched the one with Henry, but I told Henry this. It's in the upside down economy of God. I get filled up and I feel important when I'm curious about the next person. It's not. I don't feel important. Well, you do, but it's like in that selfishness of trying to feel important. I do better when I'm curious about the next person,
right?
Because it fills me up because I'm learning something about you. I'm getting to know you instead of being that selfish mode of I want to be known,
right?
So yeah.
Yeah, Roy has made a big impact, and that's. I mean, every time. I mean, it's like it can be the small things like checking out in line. Number one, being kind. Number two, just looking for a door that I can be curious about that person, and then say something to them that is an indication that God loves them. That's kind of my goal with people. And but I mean, Fight Club, First North, individuals that I am actually one-on-one meeting with, discipling. I've got several guys. Those things just fill me up.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to. I mean, I got to preach at two churches after my transplant. I did two interims that were really growing and very, very enlightening to me. What a pastor goes through.
Mm-hmm.
Gave me a chance to preach a little more than what I normally did, and 2.5 years at one place and 2 years at another place, and but it was a joy to do that, and if I get a chance to preach, I love the opportunity, and I just wait for those opportunities. But that's not important to me. If the God wants me to do it, I'll do it.
Right.
And I'll speak what He gives me to speak at that time. And other than that, I just am like you. When I guess there's just such an awesome joy of thinking that you would be chosen to preach or to teach a class, or even to do something like this. I mean, this is. I hope nothing that has been portrayed or said here has been portrayed with any kind of false tense. I don't have anything to hide.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just what's most important is that the message of the gospel of what Jesus Christ has done for us is shared, and how it's impacted my life. I mean, the Jack of 2024 is far less the Jack of, say, pre-2009. 2000 or 1995, whenever I came on staff here. And then after 3 months getting here, I'm giving my life to Christ. That moment was a transforming moment. And God, in His way that He felt, He gently moved me out of a dark place to a place of usefulness, to a place of light, to a place of knowing that I belong to Him, to a place that I understood that there was a real battle going on.
Right.
And it just scares me now, and I don't want to ever be in that place again. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. If you had one encouraging thing that you would want to pass on, which I feel your whole story is just encouraging. Like, so not to say that your story wasn't encouraging, but like, what's the one thing you'd want a man watching this to really come away with and to step out and do something with?
If I were to sit down and have a conversation with a man and hope that I could be of influence on his life, I guess one verse I would share with him would be Isaiah 41:10, because it's a verse that says, first of all, so do not fear, for I'm with you. Fear is part of the bondage that men have to break in their lives. Not fear of God. There ought to be a greater fear of God that would move us to a place that we're willing to deal with the fears in our lives, if that makes sense.
It doesn't me.
So it says, so do not fear, for I'm with you. Do not be dismayed, for I'm your God. There's a lot of stuff in this world that is pretty dismal.
Mm.
It's pretty confusing. It's pretty negative. It's pretty sad to see where our world is going. But he is saying, so do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you, and I will help you. God, what I have found that there are days that I walk in my office and I'm just not ready for my quiet time. But whenever I sit and I begin to spend time having conversation with him,
Mm-hmm.
as far as where I'm at, why I'm feeling that way, and the more I find myself moving into a direction that I'm ready to do that. And I would encourage men to just take that and to believe him. So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you, help you, that you would trust in his ability to help you to move. Like when Jesus told the story about, taking up the yoke, that's a place in my life that sometimes I go in my office and the thing I have to do is I have to yoke myself up to him.
Mm-hmm.
I can't go in there and have some other kind of yoke of my life that's going to burden me down,
Right.
and keep me from the word and keep me from receiving from the word. But I've got to stop and I've got to yoke myself with Jesus and say, I'm gonna trust you in this. What he says, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy, and weary and heavy laden, I'll give you rest.
Mm-hmm.
He wants us to find rest, and the way we find rest is to let him share his yoke with us,
Right.
and take that off of us.
That you've helped me. No, because I'm sitting here thinking about my. I don't have an office. I have a desk in the corner of the dining room where I do my quiet times, which have been a struggle here lately, just because of the medical stuff I'm going through. I'm tired and hard to focus and whatnot. But far too often, I go into those moments of sitting at my desk, not yoking myself to him. It's literally just, here's my Bible. And not that I don't study it and get something out of it or learn something of how to live my life even better from that point. But that thought of, man, I'm really not tying myself to him. I'm just literally just reading and going on under my own strength for the rest of the day.
Right.
That is a great visual for me to walk away with.
Somebody that shared that in Fight Club the last couple of weeks or something of that sort, I can't remember, or if it was at a training, but it really stuck with me. But until I learned how to discipline myself, how to do that, it could just be as miserable going in as it is coming out.
Yeah, coming out.
And I don't want it to be like that. I want to know God. I want to experience his presence. I want to just have that encounter that I know I've been in his presence and I can walk out and I may not have this kind of glory all over me, but I want something different about me to look different. And then the last part of that verse, so do not fear, for I'm with you. Do not be dismayed, for I'm your God. I will strengthen you and I will help you, and I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. I always think I love the image of being in God's hand. Jesus gave the example in John 10 whenever he talks about I'm trying to remember how it says he and I and the Father are one. And he goes on and he talks about Jesus has given you to me, and no one will snatch you out of my hand. Mm-hmm. And he goes on and he says, my Father who's greater than all, no one will snatch him out of my Father's hand. Jesus, I think of myself. Mm-hmm. I want to know today when I leave here, I am in your righteous right hand.
Right.
That I stay there. Because I know if I'm there, I'm safe, I'm protected, and I'm at your beck and call to do your will. And so that verse really became real to me with my first heart surgery. And but it really became more real as I faced my first transplant, as I thought about, God really does hold me, and he's not going to let me go. That's pretty cool to think about.
Yeah, and for me, in my struggles, I had this tendency to see God as this far off, distant person, and in thinking about the yoking myself to him, and I would think that would help me bring him closer. Because even when I study or I'm reading or doing journals or whatever, I do think about the fact that I'm trying to seek his face. I'm trying to live a life, see how to live a life that was worthy of living and pleasing to him. And not that I have to work for that salvation, but it's just I work out of the salvation.
Right.
And wanting to pursue him so I know how to do it better.
Right.
But still, and I'm sure there's some guys out there the same thing of I again going back to the beginning, like I know God, I know I'm saved, I know all those things, but still struggling in the fact that he's a far off God to me, right. Which is not true. Because there's things that have happened in my life, situations where he has just demonstrated his right hand and his powerfulness in my life. And so it's kind of crazy. I feel like a crazy person. The fact that I know these things, I've seen the evidence, but yet I still have that hard time of being close to him. So that's just, I don't know, that's just a journey I'm on. And I wanted to say that to hopefully help some guy that's listening to know that if you're feeling that way, you're not alone. There's others out here that are still kind of struggling with that. Even though I have been saved for, I think, since you went to college. That was back in 96. But yeah, I don't know. Doing these podcasts, getting to talk to all these people like you, it's just as much encouraging to me and helps me think about things as it does. I hope that anybody that watches it. But I don't know what the but is. I just love doing it, and I thank you for talking to me and sharing your life, and you're being vulnerable and authentic. To, like I said in the beginning of the episode, I don't know how much you know, but I do see you as a spiritual mentor. I feel like you have helped me in some areas of my life in the beginning, right on 2012 time frame and beyond, of being able just to come to you and have questions and just talk. And I really appreciate it. And I just want you to know. And this has been a complete honor for me to be able to come to your house, to sit down and for us to talk and for you to share your life. And I thank you.
Well, I've enjoyed it. And I do hope it impacts somebody to think about what is my next step in moving towards a right relationship with God. What do I need to do?
Mm-hmm.
Because I've questioned so many times, God, why now? Why are you letting me understand things like I've never understood them before? I'm nothing. I really feel that way, and it just boggles my mind that God can take someone like me and love me and treat me in such a unique way.
Mm-hmm.
To know Him, to love Him, serve Him, and in turn learn how to love others the way He loved me. That's the end of all things, the way we love others.
Right.
And that's a challenge. So
Yeah. I think it is sometimes. I feel like this is a good place to stop unless you got something else you want to share.
I mean, there's always things I could share, but I don't think.
Thank you for tuning in to the Hope Over Coffee podcast. If this story has touched you and you know someone who would benefit from it, please share it with them through one of the many platforms Hope Over Coffee is available on. Hope Over Coffee can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, and several other platforms. If you'd like to stay connected and become a part of the community, you can find Hope Over Coffee on the Band app by searching Hope Over Coffee on the band.us website. Thanks once again for joining us on this journey, and we look forward to sharing another cup of coffee with you next time.